Hi, my name is David Rippy. I am a certified hypnotherapist where I take clients into a deep hypnotic state where they can share details of a previous life. This is the introduction of my book, The Immortal Soul. Enjoy.
Introduction. Do not believe in anything simply because you have heard it. Do not believe in anything simply because it is spoken of and rumored by many. Do not believe in anything simply because it is found written in your religious books. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your teachers and elders. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. But after observation and analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit of one and all, then accept it and live up to it. Buddha. Hypnosis has fascinated me since my youth when I first saw it performed on a Boy Scouting trip with a troop of about 30 other scouts. One night of the outing, all of us crammed into one of the larger tents and watched in awe as an elder scout hypnotized a volunteer. We listened spellbound to the hypnotist as he began using basic relaxation techniques to put our friend into what appeared to be a hypnotic trance. Understandably, the majority of us were initially skeptical about what seemed to be a carnival sideshow display of mesmerism. The demonstration appeared to have the fingerprints of two scout pranksters all over it. We continued to watch suspiciously as the hypnotist commanded his volunteer to straighten his arm so that nothing could bend it. We all took turns trying. I noticed that as every scout struggled against his rigidly locked arm, he remained calm, and it didn't appear he had to exert a lot of energy during this trial. It was easy to notice that the hypnotized participant's countenance and facial expressions were mild, almost robotic, as every scout strained to bend his rigidly locked arm. None of us succeeded. It was as if he were partially removed from the event, but not entirely. Next, the hypnotist instructed his subconscious participant that he had incredible pain tolerance, was impervious to fire and burns, and was invulnerable to the prick of a needle. Everyone in the tent straightened up, suddenly more attentive to the spectacle, knowing that for an average, awake person that would be impossible. But on this night, hypnotized by the elder scout, he was capable of things none of us, volunteer included, had ever witnessed. He didn't seem to feel pain. He had an uncharacteristic physical strength. He was bolstering his body with reinforcement from somewhere in the innermost recesses of his mind. The tent grew strangely quiet. We watched as our hypnotized friend didn't flinch, jerk, or yell out in anguish as the hypnotist stuck a needle into his arm several times and ran a flame along its underside. All convinced, we asked for the demonstration to end, wanting to spare our friend any further testing. I felt like I had just witnessed something magical. Eventually, the hypnotist instructed our friend to awaken feeling indomitable and robust. He was quiet at first, just blinking his eyes. After a spell, he shared his experience, explaining that he felt enveloped by a sense of calm at first, followed by an ever-strengthening feeling of relaxation and control. He just knew that his arm couldn't be bent, and he never felt the pain of the needles or fire. He was able to go along with the suggestions from a semi-detached place of power and inner self-control. He confirmed that upon waking up, he felt better and more energetic, just as he was instructed. I sat there eagerly absorbing what I'd just seen and heard. It was at that moment that I began to appreciate the powers of the human mind. It was the dawning of the realization that positive, self-reinforcing dialogue was beneficial and could induce a profoundly relaxed state where incredible things were possible. A decade later, flipping through local television stations, I stumbled upon a talk show featuring a hypnotist doing a demonstration of past life regression. I thought back to the hypnotized scout in the tent and the unusual powers he demonstrated while in a deeply regressed hypnotic state. Already believing in reincarnation, I stopped channel surfing and started watching. Over the next hour, she captivated me with her remarkable skills, using past life regression techniques on 3 audience volunteers. The first, a middle-aged businessman, began recounting life as a Chinese teen in the early 1600s. He detailed his clothes, shoes worn during the era where he lived, as well many more facets of his life. The second, a man in his mid-30s, detailed his time as a woman who'd just opened a new dress shop that catered to flappers and other people with pizzazz in New York City in the roaring 20s. The third, another man, described his life as a starving woman in India, begging desperately for rupees so she could eat. Each could provide remarkable details, from one subject describing hamlets in China to another navigating the side streets of Manhattan. Remarkably, that man had never visited the Big Apple in his current life. That was all I needed to see. I had to try it. I wanted to experience a hypnotic state to see if I had led other lives and learn more about myself in the process. In my further research, I discovered that reincarnation had been in the Bible. 165 church elders during the Second Council of Constantinople in 553 AD had reincarnation removed from the text after being leaned on strongly by the emperor at the time. Before that, rebirth was an unquestioned pillar of belief taught by the early church fathers, such as Origen, St. Gregory, and Basilides as a matter of course. It was written in the Bible after all. These teachers, as well as their congregants, understood it logically. How could a loving, benevolent God give one person a wonderful, happy life, and another soul a sad and challenging experience, if a soul was only to have one life? Early church leaders understood this, and reincarnation remained a pillar of Christianity for over 500 years after Christ's death. A diabolical plot was launched in the court of the Byzantine Emperor Justinian to have reincarnation removed from the Bible. In the generation before 553 AD, reincarnation was an uncontested fact. This fundamental dogma was even reinforced by the Council of Chalcedon in 451 AD, who could believe that the ascension of one man to head up the Eastern Roman Empire in 527 AD would have such an impact on the truth, let alone the lives of so many? The purpose of this book is not to question whether or not that text should have been removed. There still remains quite a mystery if the topic of reincarnation even came up in some of these council meetings. For every article or historian that you read, there are countervailing opinions on both sides whether reincarnation came up or it didn't. I personally think that reincarnation should never have been removed from the Bible, as it changed the course of Christian theology and the understanding of reality for so many. Here are some modern-day statistics. 51% of the world believes in God. 51% of people believe in reincarnation, 26% aren't sure, and 23% think that we cease to exist at death. I'm confident of a higher power. I felt reincarnation had merit, but I wasn't sure at first. Like many in the U.S., I was the product of a branch of Christianity, and in my youth attended a Presbyterian church with my parents. I had never heard anything in church about reincarnation growing up. I realized later as I approached adulthood, if I just took the words of what the minister was saying to heart without researching, I was doing myself a great disservice. I would be no better than a simple follower with no original or well-reasoned opinions of my own. I decided to begin a self-exploration and looked up the number of the hypnotist I had watched on television and made an appointment. To someone on the street, unaware of her hypnotherapy background, she appeared as a kind, gentle grandmother in her early 70s. She looked well versed in baking tasty chocolate chip cookies, as opposed to someone who could help a client explore their subconscious and bring forth the hazy memories of an earlier life. After driving to her house, situated in a well-kept middle-class neighborhood, her husband greeted me at the door and welcomed me into their den. She came in with a smile, and after small talk about why I wanted to explore a past life, we started the session. After a brief hypnotic induction, I began to find myself in a mild trance. During her starting questions, I wasn't confident in my mind whether the information I was receiving felt accurate or was even real. Initially, her questions didn't elicit many answers. I just never felt sure. She guided me more deeply into the recesses of my subconscious with stronger in-depth induction techniques. I found myself slipping into a deepened hypnotic state, and as if from a distance, her voice instructed me to picture a dwelling or structure that I might have once known. After a while, a picture of the inside of a dark cabin surfaced in my mind. I was surrounded by handmade furniture, crude cooking utensils, some homemade by their appearance, with a big cast-iron pot hanging over the fireplace. She asked me to open the door and go outside. Pushing the wooden plank door open and stepping outside, the sun nearly blinded me. Once my eyes adjusted, I saw only green fields extending to the horizon and dotted with the occasional tree before spotting a woman in the yard. The hypnotist asked if the woman I saw was me. "No," I answered immediately. "I think that is my wife." After looking at her for a while, I knew her name was Elizabeth. I watched her, noticing her wearing a simple blue and white checked dress with a small matching cap on her head. She appeared to be making butter in an old churn. I stood there just observing, having been instructed that she couldn't see me. I noticed a young girl, roughly 8 years old, run quickly past my wife. I knew immediately she was my daughter. Her red hair was styled in 2 pigtails that sailed behind her as she whipped around the front yard playing. I knew her name was Amy Catherine. Eventually, I remembered my name in that life, John Adam Miles. It was like watching an old, colorized family home movie. As I viewed the scene in my mind, the memories of that earlier life became clearer. As we went forward, the amnesia blocks that had kept the knowledge of that life locked deeply away in my subconscious fell away. Despite looking and acting remarkably different than I do in this life, I knew it was me. The longer I watched, the more familiar everything seemed, and I began to realize things about myself. I'd become orphaned when I was about 8, and was left abandoned in New York City. By the 1850s, I was in my mid-30s and toiling over some pretty good soil, judging by the health of the crops. I was working as a farmer living roughly 30 miles southwest of Lexington, Kentucky. My frame was tall and slender, capped with dark, long hair. My nature was to be distrustful of most people, and I was not much of a talker. In my current life, I'm outgoing, and so I was surprised to find myself with such a reticent personality. At first, the images had a hazy and unfocused feel to them, but as the session went on, the images, thoughts, and feelings began to grow clearer in my mind. I was bewildered. Was that me? I visited the hypnotist twice more, each session spaced about 6 months apart, wanting to see if the same life would appear. During the next regression, I was the same man, and was able to see other snapshots throughout that life. The hypnotist nudged me to recount a memorable time that I was proud of, but that someone else might not find as remarkable. I saw myself winning a long rifle shooting competition. My prize was a nice-sized turkey. I viewed myself wearing a long black coat and top hat standing with 10 other men dressed similarly. All of us were drinking a pint of homemade beer served from a wooden barrel on the back of an old horse-drawn wagon. After those first 2 past life regressions, I assumed the life I'd see during the 3rd session would be the same, and that it was the most recent life before this one. Expecting more of the same life, I set up a 3rd appointment. The hypnotist induced me into a deep hypnotic trance, and asked me once again to picture a dwelling and describe it when I was ready. She added on a reminder that I was there to observe, and not get emotionally involved. As the gray faded from the scene, it was as if a veil was pulled back off my blocked memories, revealing a window into a different life than I'd expected. These were different memories than I had experienced before, all the different lives I'd led stored somewhere in the dark, locked up annexes of my subconscious. I described to the hypnotist what I saw. I saw myself on a lawn about 20 yards away from the right side of a beautiful white house edged by a wraparound porch. It was situated to face the beautiful blue waves of an immaculately kept beach, just 50 yards away. The sun winked in the sky, partially hidden at times by passing clouds, and the temperature was warm, a perfect beach day. I immersed myself in the reverie until her voice, as if from a great distance, cut into my scene and asked, "Do you see yourself?" "No," I said. She followed with, "Why is that?" "It sounds like a perfect day." Suddenly, I understood why the house was empty. Viewing inside the house from a distance, as if my eyesight had taken on that of an eagle, I noticed linens covering all the furniture, the ghostly reminder of a family who wasn't there. In a somber tone, I shared, "I think I died." After a pause, she gently reminded me that we were only to observe, and would not get emotionally involved before telling me to go 5 years earlier in that life. I now saw myself laughing in an expansive kitchen surrounded by people close to me, feeling they were my family and a few very close friends. I stood in the back of this crowded kitchen, and when I glanced at my former self, I was taken back. I saw a tall, attractive brunette. That revelation rocked me as it wasn't what I expected. I was pretty sure I would see my previous life as a man again. We were all laughing in this kitchen together eating breakfast. I saw everyone passing around a paper which appeared to feature Babe Ruth on the cover. We were laughing over another scandal that the Babe had found himself embroiled in. It had the feel of the early 1930s as I recounted the scene, but I felt conflicted since the present me didn't know anything about Babe Ruth beyond that he had played for the Yankees at some point. Before the regression, I hadn't known about his illustrious personal life, the records he had set, or much beyond the fact that he had played baseball. Somehow during this session, I found myself knowing more about Ruth than I knew in this life, and could recall details of his life that I'd locked away in mind. As the reel of my past life flickered on, I saw pictures of a successful woman, a writer for an East Coast art magazine, who was married but had no children and lived in Connecticut. I summered at this beach property, witnessing myself at different times standing on the spacious front porch and looking out over the ocean. This beautiful beachfront property on Cape Cod belonged to my father. As the session went on, I remembered that he was a prominent Boston doctor, well known for his work with heart patients. Later, I learned what had happened to me. Sometime in my mid-30s, I developed a form of cancer that was untreatable and died. In that life, I knew of Edgar Cayce's work and believed in reincarnation. I aspired to write a Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, but I never did. I was at peace with that in my last days, and a belief in the afterlife and reincarnation made my passing easier. After that session, I recognized the immortality of the human soul. Still early in my exploration, I did not yet have the groundwork laid or the wisdom I would need to pursue a greater understanding of the afterlife and the journey of the soul. Nonetheless, my 3 past life readings had piqued my interest, and I needed to know more. Over the following years, I continued my journeys inward, read many good sources along the way, researched deeply, and learned of others with similar interest in the hypnotherapy field. I read many published psychologists' accounts of patients who had near-death experiences, used hypnosis in past life regression therapy, and those who had pioneered the regression work of life between lives. I eagerly followed the work of Edgar Cayce, the Ascended Masters, Dr. Michael Newton, Dr. Byron Weiss, and the University of Virginia Department of Paranormal Studies, among other sources that dated back through the ages. In time, I came to what I consider an irrefutable conclusion: the soul is immortal and reincarnates in different and varied lifetimes to foster soul growth and evolution. Eventually, those souls that have had enough experiences and lessons and had many, many lives, no longer have the need to reincarnate. Their consciousness becomes part of the collective overmind or God. These souls assume other tasks in God's creations as well and become what we know as ascended masters, wise ones, and benevolent teachers who help other souls with their advancement and evolution. There is no fast track to enlightenment. One who feels they've discovered the state concludes eventually that it only exists in the collective consciousness, or the general repository of all knowledge, lives, actions, and thoughts. Through research, meditation, and hypnosis, one can shed their earthly veil and awaken from a cosmic amnesia state to discover their true nature as divine, unique, and immortal beings. This repository of all knowledge is known by many names, as the Akasha, the Bible's Book of Life, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead. This storehouse is one where each of our souls contribute every life, experience, thought, deed, and action on our every journey, all added to the collective consciousness. Knowing that, we can grasp that enlightenment is never static, is always changing, and grows and evolves with each life undertaken. Everything flows back to the collective consciousness, Source, Spirit, Yahweh, Brahma, or whatever name you use for God in your culture. The limitations of the mind are only one of degree. The more significant your exploration of knowledge, wisdom, and enlightenment, the greater your mind will expand in your consciousness with it. One who seeks will find, one who searches will be rewarded, and one who takes the journey will bring him or herself closer to the truth. My expeditions inward using meditation, mantras, chanting, and hypnosis, along with vigorous study, have helped me on my journey in pursuit of what happens to us at death, and why we incarnate. It also endowed me with a greater understanding of the worlds and dimensions beyond Earth's plane. Perhaps you think it was a random event that put humanity here, something from our Darwinian past that brought us to current day. Or maybe you believe that something of a divine nature carefully created what we know to be life. To others, perhaps you feel it was a combination of both. Either way, join me as we pull back the curtain for these 8 subjects, uncovering their past lives, what happened at their death, where they went, and the souls and counsels they encountered on their journey. It is my sincerest hope that this book will open your eyes a little wider, broaden your knowledge, and deepen your grasp of reality. For those open-minded but skeptical, or unsure like I was initially, hopefully the pages of this book will give you new insights on age-old questions, such as what happens after I die? Why am I here? Will I see my departed loved ones again?